Carlos Mendoza was officially introduced as the New York Mets manager today. I'll break down my 5 key takeaways from his introductory press conference on today's show.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on X, Finkelstein Ryan. You also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. Today's episode is brought to you by Jase Medical. Empower yourself when you purchase a Jase case, providing you with a personal supply of 5 antibiotics that treat 50-plus infections. Get yours today at jasemedical.com. That's Jase, Jase, medical.com. Carlos Mendoza was officially announced as the 25th manager in Mets history today, met with the media, and I came away impressed. Now, I have to say on the front end that it's a press conference, and I was probably, if you go back in the archives to when Luis Rojas was introduced as the Mets manager, I'm sure I was impressed then. I'm sure I was impressed when Buck Showalter was announced as the Mets manager. I'm sure I was impressed when Carlos Beltran, for a brief moment, was announced as the Mets manager. And it is pretty shocking to think how many of these post-managerial introduction presser podcasts, whatever, I've done. And now we're coming up on the end of 5 years hosting this show. I started in March of 2019. But going into the 6th season, how many managers have had this position? And the turnover has been alarming. So it's hard to just say, oh, Mendoza, slam dunk hire. He's awesome. He won us over in the press conference. He's going to be great. But he also could have lost us in the press conference, and he didn't do that. So all we have to grade him on is what we saw today. And to me, it was a really good job. He came in with a clear message he wanted to convey. And I think my first key takeaway is confidence. He had confidence in that room. He commanded the room. He fielded questions in English and Spanish. And it's clear that he very much believes in himself and that he's earned this opportunity. He feels that he's earned it. And, he's assured in the culture that he's trying to build. And it feels like he has an idea of how he plans to go about establishing that culture. He said, quote, culture is driven by us, by the way we connect, by the way we think, by the way we value our culture, by the way we communicate each and every day. That's my goal, to continue to drive that culture. He talked about, how important it is to reach out to the players now and how he has to earn their respect. He's already spoken with Francisco Lindor, Brandon Nimmo, Pete Alonso, Edwin Diaz. He said of Pete Alonso, he spoke with him for 45 minutes. It's a conversation that could have kept going on, talked about them being sharp, good human beings, how he wants to create a welcome environment for the young players so that they could assume roles during the season, that they feel comfortable to go out and to play and to have that mesh of veterans and young players. He wants to encourage the veterans to build relationships with the younger players. He wants to encourage the young players to pick the brains of the veterans. And I feel like all the stuff that he spoke about, it's coming from a place of experience. Yes, he hasn't been a MLB manager before, but he has managed ball clubs, and he also has experience in a big league dugout for 6 years with the Yankees. He has something to draw on from an organization that, whether you like them or not, they typically have been a winning franchise. They're maybe in a bad state right now, coming off one of their worst seasons over this past year, but the Yankees generally have been a winning team, and he's got to see how that organization has been run. He's going to bring some of that. He's going to have fresh ideas here as well. Right when it started, though, when it comes to the confidence, I want to get back to that a little bit. I saw him laying out papers, right? David Stearns introducing him, and he's laying out papers. And I thought, okay, so I guess that's his speech. That's he's going to read off of that. And I was just curious how it was going to go, because if he sat there and read through 5 pages, I would have been a little bit more concerned about how he was going to be able to handle the media, because that's an important part of the job. And this was obviously the first example that we had of him having to face the media. And he might have had 5 pages of notes, because his introduction, what he said at the beginning when it was finally passed over to him, here's the manager, and Carlos is open to speak. He really touched on a lot of things. He touched on his family. He had a whole part of his opening where he spoke directly to his father in Spanish, which shows how important this is to him, the opportunity that he's getting, which he's relishing in. And he listed some of the mentors he's had along the way and gave the special thank yous to them. But it was all organized, and he didn't stumble through it. He was prepared in that too. Like, if this showed his preparation that he's going to take into the job, I think it does bode well, because he clearly had a big amount of prepared, comments that he was hoping to make. And I think he got them all in, and that again speaks pretty well. He talked about that relationship with the media and how he respects the media, how he, is open to building relationships with the media, and how he, respected their baseball acumen. So he's kind of buttering them up, but that's a good thing, because he has to have the media on his side a little bit. He's going to be the face of this team. He's going to have those press conferences before the game and after the game. And it's the New York media. They're going to ask him some tough questions. It's good that he's already trying to build that rapport with them. And I feel like he went a long way in doing that. And when it comes to how ready he is for the position as a first-time manager, we'll get to that a little bit more at the end. But as he sort of, got to his background, right? He talked about, kind of coming up more old school as a player, where he learned the fundamentals and he still carries those with him. But he's also, as a coach, come up in this more information era. And so, he tries to blend both, which I think is the ideal, style that people hope for. A manager that can go at their gut, that has that lifelong baseball acumen, plus knows how to process the information and distill it and use it to his benefit. He talked about what he wanted from the team. First two things: preparation, attention to detail. Great. That's what you want to hear. So he wants the team to go out and play hard on every pitch, wants them to have fun. He did mention that as well. And I do think that could be a breath of fresh air. Buck Showalter has done this job a million times over. And in some respects, that's what made him a great fit for the Mets, that experience he brought to the table. But when a team goes stale the way the Mets did, and you're now in this new era here with a new president of baseball operation, to get a fresh voice in there, I do think that was important. I do think he's going to bring something to this job that Buck Showalter couldn't. He is going to do everything to the best of his ability. Not that Buck didn't, but it is different when it's your first time around. And if you are, trying to prove yourself when you have a young team of guys, because the Mets have to be driven in the next couple years by the young core that's coming up, to be able to have that blend of common goals, the desire to prove yourself, to establish yourself. He's trying to establish himself as a big league manager. The players are trying to establish themselves as big leaguers, with obviously the veterans that are still in place. I think it's going to be a good blend. I really do. And he mentioned this as well. He said, when you care about people, when you connect, it creates that culture we are talking about. David Stearns mentioned a lot of the same things. And I think the way the two of them seem to be in sync, that's really important, as well as how much it seems like Carlos Mendoza wanted this particular opportunity. And those are my two next takeaways that we're going to get to in the next segment here. Before we do, though, today's episode is brought to you by Jase Medical. There's a lot of uncertainty in the world today. It's important to be prepared. Supply chain shortages for medications, or an inability to get medications in a timely manner due to natural disasters, or if you're traveling abroad, all of this can leave you unprepared. Everyone should be empowered to care for themselves and their loved ones during the unexpected, and that's why Jase Medical has the Jase case, providing you with 5 life-saving antibiotics for emergency use. Jase will handle everything from online evaluation to licensed pharmacy medication delivery and ongoing consultation and care. Jase was doctor created and it's doctor recommended. You can now customize your Jase case with dozens of add-on medications. You can even add additional life-saving medications based on your unique needs. My wife and I, we like to travel. And when we do, it's always just good for us to know that we have that safety blanket with us, that we can bring our Jase case and know that if something unexpected comes up, we're prepared for it. If you want to do the same for your family, go to jasemedical.com, enter code LOCKEDON at checkout for a $20 discount on your order. That's promo code LOCKEDON at jasemedical.com, JASE medical.com. Now, getting to my next big takeaway for Carlos Mendoza and what I saw in his introductory press conference, it also ties back a little bit to the first one, the confidence that I saw in Mendoza, and then you juxtapose that to the lack thereof, maybe, of Craig Counsell in his introductory press conference with the Cubs. There's a lot of pressure with what, Counsell just did, taking that contract, going in division to the Cubs. And he looked uncomfortable. And he didn't even necessarily seem like he was all that thrilled about the opportunity. He could say it. He could say he's excited, for the chance, and he wanted something different to drive him competitively. But his aura, his the way his essence, like, he is not giving that off. He was giving off a man that was conflicted and a man that was uncomfortable with the spotlight. Carlos Mendoza seemed to welcome it, and he seems to be welcoming this opportunity, which is, again, the next takeaway here, that he wanted this job. This was the job. He was flying all across the country to interview for different positions, and it seems like Carlos Mendoza was going to be a manager, whether it was with the Mets or another team. Apparently, the Brewers would have hired him. Who knows if the Padres would have wanted him? There was other jobs out there that this guy was, a finalist for, and he was weighing a lot of offers, I am sure. And he talked about, getting the job. That someone asked him, it was a great question. What happened when he got the job? Like, what was that experience like? And he was mentioning how it was a Sunday. He was, at his house with his wife and his kids, and his son was bored because they were just sitting there basically waiting for the phone to ring. And they went outside. His son's an infielder, and so he was doing drills with his son, and then all of a sudden the call comes from David Stearns, and how his wife was overjoyed and she was crying, and his kids were all fired up, and just how important this was to his entire family. It's not only just that he wanted to be a manager. When all the jobs were laid in front of him, it's not like he was going to get to take Aaron Boone's job with the Yankees and stay where he was at. Taking over the New York Mets was the job for him. He spoke about how much his family loves New York, how excited he is about the roster and a chance to win. He mentioned multiple times how this is a team that, won over 100 games not too long ago. How a lot of those players are still on this team. And so, I really look at this, and, Craig Counsell, he might have come here for the cash, right? He might have come here because if the Cubs didn't end up getting into the fray, the Mets might have been his ticket to set that bar for managers. And, obviously there's been other reporting that says he never would have considered the Mets. But my point is, if you are disappointed about Carlos Mendoza because you were hoping the Mets would get an experienced manager, and you look at the two options that were, kind of the finalists in this case here, you got the guy that wanted to be here, and that's important. And a guy that looks at this as a great opportunity, that looks at this as a privilege to be the manager of the New York Mets. He was just rejoicing in how the jersey fit and how it felt to be on. That's what you want to hear from your manager. And he says that he understands the expectation that fans have. Talked about how the New York fans know their baseball, and how the New York fans are going to let you know when things aren't going well, but they're going to be with you when things are going well. And he talked about experiencing playoff games on the other side of town, and said he can't wait to experience that here with Mets fans. All that's going to go a long way, okay, to win over the fan base. But it's also intangibles that get brought into this experience that are, or get brought into this opportunity for him that are really important. That he is in this position, that he is really, relishing that chance that he that has been taken on him, and he doesn't want to disappoint. So I feel good about that aspect of it. Now, maybe the most important of my 5 key takeaways is this next one, and that's the fact that he's the ideal partner for David Stearns. They talked about the process, and Mendoza mentioned he was on 6 hours of Zoom calls. And I'm guessing that was the first round of interviews. I think is how he was describing it, meeting with a lot of different people. An hour with Stearns, an hour with person X, Y, and Z, and then going out to New York and to meet all these different people, and meeting with sets of people and in all different phases of the organization. So he won over a lot of people before he eventually meets Steve Cohen at the end of the process. And he mentioned how intense it was, but how much he enjoyed that process. All of this, again, ties into how he's going to have to work in this franchise, how he's going to have to work with so many different people, and how he's going to be part of a real collaborative effort. The manager is not just the end all be all anymore. There's a lot of people that are going to factor into the decisions that are made. And it seems like he's going to really challenge people. One of the things that he mentioned, he said, they were interviewing me, but I was interviewing them. I think that was a really interesting quote, that, this was a guy that didn't just have one opportunity. As I said, he had different offers or different jobs he was going for, and he wanted to make sure that for his first managerial job, he took the right one. And this was for him the right one. And as David Stearns laid out the process, seems like it was the same thing. Stearns mentioned how the first stage was vetting their candidate pool. That's, checking the references, hearing what everyone says about the given candidates to get a sense of who they are. And then it's getting to know everyone. And the next step, he says, to make sure that he had a connection with the person he was, talking to become the manager. And he mentioned how, they're going to be going through a lot together. They're going to go through hopefully a lot of highs, but there's obviously going to be lows in any given season. They have to be able to, stay on the same page and have that trust in each other. And this was one of the more interesting things he said. He said, this is from Stearns, the more time Carlos and I spent together, the more comfortable we were that we'd be able to do that together, to go through that process of working together and, going through the marathon that is a baseball season. Talked about trusting each other, being able to have, tough conversations and challenge each other. And I think it was evident watching these two interact that there was a lot of chemistry there. And again, that is very important. So I really felt good about seeing those guys sitting next to each other, because that's the future of the New York Mets right now. It is David Stearns is leading your front office. Carlos Mendoza is leading your dugout. And for now, until we watch him manage games, it's hard to tell. But I have supreme confidence in these guys, particularly because I have supreme confidence in the guy that's making all the decisions atop. I believe in David Stearns as an executive. And because of that, I have to believe that he hired the right guy to work with him. So all of that to me was a really good, sign that everyone's going to be pulling in the same direction. Now, part of that is also now building out coaching staff. And I did like to hear that Mendoza expects to compete this year. It's good to know they're going to try to build a winning culture that's going to start immediately. And they want coaches that, as Mendoza says, will bring energy, will earn respect from the players, will be able to have tough conversations and have leadership qualities. Jeremy Hefner is staying on as the pitching coach. They have to hire a bench coach and fill out the rest of that coaching staff. So that'll be the next stage here, is to see them sort of, make all those final hires and round everything into form. Obviously, the offseason is going on at the same time. So while you're interviewing coaches, you're also trying to bring in talent. And that's obviously a top priority for the New York Mets at this stage. But I like the decision makers in place. I think the Mets are in good hands. But I have 2 more takeaways to get to. One of them is, hey, it's still a first-time manager, so we'll get to maybe the apprehension that still exists and why I think this group can rise above that. Before we get to that, though, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Score early this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. If you're thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is so easy to use, and there's a wide range of betting options, including spread, player props, over-unders, and more. Visit FanDuel.com if you want to get in on the action. And again, remember, $5 moneyline bet. Cash that in, and you'll get $150 in bonus bets. You got the NFL season, college football, the NBA season with their in-season tournament. There is a lot going on right now. So if you want to get in on all of the different action that's available to you, visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. Kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. Before we get into my final two takeaways from the Carlos Mendoza introductory press conference, I want to tell you all about becoming a Locked On Mets insider. This is a new service we're offering where you can get text message updates from me about the Mets. It's hot stove season. Anytime the Mets are in a rumor for a player or if they actually start to make some signings, that's where I'll go first to give you my 2 cents before I even hit record on the show. Or you can also ask me questions. It's a one-on-one communication service where you can get access to me on anything that you are interested in, from what I talked about the night before or what I might talk about on a future show. So if you want to become a Locked On Mets insider, find the link in the episode description or go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. Now, one of the takeaways that I don't know if I guess would call it a takeaway from the presser or just stating the obvious, but there's unknown here. This is a first-time manager. That is something that you just can't ignore. Oh, like I said before, there was a point in time where I was probably sold on a Luis Rojas press conference. A time where, I wasn't hosting the show yet, but you go back to when Mickey Callaway was introduced all those years ago, and I might have been, sold on him as well. So, yes, there is part of this where you go into these things wanting the best. And so you're going to see that rosy picture of why Mendoza is a good fit. But while he's a first-time manager, I think the fact that this is really a culmination of years coaching, that to me makes me think that he is prepared for this opportunity. Yes, it's the biggest leap any manager is going to make. You can manage in winter ball in the minor leagues. It is nothing like stepping out on the grand stage where you're going to be interviewed before and after every game 162 times, and particularly in this market where any 5-game losing streak is going to send an entire fan base and all the media outlets into a tailspin. This is a big, big, big change from what Mendoza was doing last year as the bench coach of the Yankees. This is a drastic increase in responsibility that Mendoza has to undertake now. But I still think he's ready for it. And, someone asked about the fact that there's never been a first-time manager in the last 30 years to win it all. And they asked, Stearns about it, Mendoza about it. And Stearns highlighted the skill set that Mendoza has, his ability to communicate with people, people of varying backgrounds, his experiences in his own career that have given him a real, inside look at the game through so many different lenses, where he's able to communicate with so many different types of people. That's the biggest part of this job, is communication. And again, small sample size. It's one press conference. He could be horrible for all I know. But what I saw, to me, was a really strong communicator. And I think that's going to bode well. And also, yes, first-time manager, but long history in baseball. He's a baseball lifer, and he has been around some pretty prominent people that he discussed. For one, he mentioned how he was in an elevator when he was a kid with Luis Aparicio, who is, he said, the only Hall of Famer from Venezuela. And he also got a chance to play for him. I think he said in a winter league at some point where he was his manager. So that is one prominent baseball figure that was pretty important in his life. He also mentioned Dusty Baker, who he played for when he was in the Giants organization, had 3 different spring trainings where he played for Dusty, and how Dusty reached out to him and has given us advice about, what it takes to be a big league manager. He mentioned Luis Rojas. Someone asked about him. They played against each other and they were just working together on the Yankees staff. He talked about learning from Willie Randolph in his coaching career. He's been a real mentor to him. And, somebody asked him about Willie Randolph being a bench coach. He smiled about that opportunity. I don't know if Willie would really want to come back into a big league dugout at this stage in his life, but if he did to be Mendoza's bench coach, that'd be an amazing hire, and that would really take things full circle from when the Mets let him go all those years ago. I think he really was, like in my lifetime, the managers that I've seen firsthand, like Willie Randolph is up there as being one of the best the Mets have had. He also touched on Rob Thompson as someone that he would try to emulate, which was an interesting name to pull because Rob Thompson has had success as a first-time manager with the Phillies. He was obviously a part of Joe Girardi's staff with the Yankees, carried over and became the bench coach for him in Philadelphia when Joe Girardi was let go midseason. It was Thompson that took over, and Thompson that took that team to a World Series after taking over, and has since took them a game away from getting there again in the NLCS this year. So another interesting figure that has been in his coaching tree, so to speak. Someone that he has experienced time with. I guess he would be more part of, you call it Thompson's coaching tree. I guess he's part of Boone's coaching tree. But these are all people that have, been integral to his coaching career and people that he can still lean on. Now, Thompson's a competitor, but Dusty Baker is not. That's someone that he can reach out and call. Willie Randolph is not. So he has some people in his corner. He also, mentioned Ozzie Guillen as someone who he has a relationship with, Ozzie Guillen being the first Venezuelan manager to win a World Series. Hopefully Mendoza can follow him in that tradition. Overall, this is a guy who has made his entire life around the game of baseball. He knows what it takes to, build a winning culture. He's seen it firsthand. He now has to be the main orchestrator in it. But it seems like he has a vision for what he's trying to accomplish here. It seems like he is a really good partner to David Stearns in this. And overall, while I can't say with 100% certainty that he is going to be the Mets manager for the next 5 to 10 years and he's going to win a championship, I don't feel any less confident in him moving forward based on our first look at him. I think there is a lot of reason for optimism here, and we'll just see how the guys respond to him and how they play this season. But I'm excited that this part of the offseason has now come to a close. There's a manager. He's set. He's introduced. Now it's about building a roster, and I think that's the part of the offseason that is obviously the most exciting, and that's what we'll be covering here with Locked On Mets over the coming days, weeks, and maybe months here. So make sure that you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts. Follow me on X at Finkelstein Ryan. Follow the show at Locked On Mets. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. We're trying to get to 10,000 subs, so appreciate all of you who hit that subscribe. If you want to become a Locked On Mets insider, you can find the link in the episode description or go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets.